Hello, Whitehorse. It's good to be here. We've traveled a very long way, and it was worth the trip. The whole way it was worth the trip, and this is just icing on the top. Thank you very much. Icing. Icing on the top. We'll put candles on it in just a minute. Before I even get started, how many people have already seen a video that I did or have been to the web page? How many people have seen the video? Okay, about 1/4 of you. And how many people here have studied anything about the Mayan calendar? About 1/3. Okay, that gives me an idea of who I'm talking to and what I'm going to have to say. And we're going to go through some very, very basic information about the Mayan calendar. Probably much different than you thought you would hear. We're going to be covering some very new ideas. And that's the whole reason for you being here. I want to make sure, like Madeline, my partner, said, if at any time during this talk, oh, and come on in. If at any time, oh, you too, come on in. We've got some more people showing up. If at any time something isn't really clear, raise your hand, because this is not a lecture. This is a conversation. This is a two-way street here, okay? It is my job to make sure that you are imparted this information and that you understand it. It's your job to make sure that I'm doing that. Okay? All right. So what are we going to be talking about tonight? We're going to be talking about consciousness, and calendars. What is consciousness? There sure has been a lot of people who have studied it, huh? Probably most of you have studied consciousness for a while, or you wouldn't be interested in new things like this. So many people come up with a different definition for consciousness in their studies. And it's really useful for us all to have an agreement when we get started here of what consciousness is. And one that I've found works really well, and I'll just throw it out as an idea, is that consciousness is the awareness of being aware. Whenever you've noticed yourself noticing something, you have been experiencing your own consciousness. Most of the time we just go about using it, you know, avoiding other cars on the road, you know, actually opening the screen door rather than walking into it, that kind of thing. That's using your consciousness. But when you notice yourself noticing something, you are experiencing your consciousness. Does that make sense? That fits? Okay. All right. Consciousness, then, would be the awareness of being aware. And then calendars. What is a calendar? This is stuff that you didn't get talked about in school very much. But a calendar is the absolute dead center of any civilization. It is the pinpoint center of any civilization. Its calendar. Why? Because absolutely everything in that civilization revolves around its calendar. Due dates, bill dates, when you're supposed to be at work, when you're supposed to go into grammar school, when you're supposed to graduate, how old you are. All of those things are relative to the calendar, including the evaluation of your performance. How many widgets can you produce by Wednesday? That's how valuable you are. It's all related to the calendar. A calendar is an agreement of a society or a civilization of what day it is or what time it is. And that is the absolute dead center of any civilization's consciousness. Your consciousness of what has come before or what will come in the future is all related to our calendar. Can you see how pivotal that is? In fact, it's a funny thing about consciousness. Consciousness always has a location. It looks sort of like this. Here's a pinpoint here. More like a target that represents your consciousness. Your consciousness is oriented by two considerations. A consideration is a decision on how things are. Okay? These considerations, one of them is time and the other is place. Time and place is the orientation of your consciousness. It's actually working right here and right now. Some time ago, you had the consideration that you would be at this talk. And ever since, you have been handling things that came up and your own considerations to where you would be in this place. This time and this place. It's been that way throughout your whole life. Time and place, time and place, time and place. So here you are, in this time and place. Welcome. As a matter of fact, you've probably noticed that different places have a different orientation to their consciousness. How many people have been to Vancouver? Okay. Does Vancouver have a different consciousness than Whitehorse?
Yes.
And when you were in school, you studied about different times, didn't you? And somebody in the 15th century, for instance, would have a different consciousness than you would, wouldn't they? There are things that wouldn't quite fit in their consciousness that you're using every single day. And there are certain things that they had to do every single day. Like carrying water, for instance, that wouldn't fit so comfortably in your consciousness, would it? So different times have a different orientation of consciousness, as well as different places. But this orientation, this time and place, what this is, this operation, is it's actually establishing a thing called your viewpoint. Your viewpoint. This is your point from which you view the universe. Your viewpoint is absolutely sacred. For one simple reason. You're the only one who can have it. In all of infinity and in all of the life forms and types throughout the whole universe, you are the only person who can have your viewpoint. People can approximate or kind of agree with your viewpoint, but they can't have yours. As a matter of fact, you probably already noticed you can't even give yours away. So it's very important to understand that all this information we're going to be going through this evening is not at all to change or alter your viewpoint. That's your job. We're only going to feed your viewpoint, and then you do with it what you will. Is that agreed? Okay. And I want to go into something very important right on the first page here. There is one law in the universe. One law. It's broken down into many others, but there's only one. One law. What that law is what you pay attention to is what you become conscious of. It doesn't matter if you're just a little kid with 3 ants on a stick and that's what you're paying attention to, or if you're some multidimensional being looking over 5 universes. What you pay attention to is what you become conscious of. Always. And people talk about free will. You know, where's my free will? There is only really one exercise of your free will, too. That's your choice of what you're going to pay attention to. Always, it's your choice. I had one lady say, but I don't want to pay attention to pain, you know. I wouldn't choose that. Well, have you noticed that some people can stand more pain than others? Some people go right on with a sprained ankle, and other people can't hobble another foot. Have you noticed that? Have you? Yeah. And sometimes you even can put up with more than other times, right? What is that? Sometimes you're paying more attention to the pain. Sometimes you're paying more attention to other stuff. And whose choice was it? So in all circumstances, your free will boils down to what you choose to pay attention to. Now we're ready. The absolute dead center of our civilization is called the Gregorian calendar. Gregorian calendar. And that was actually put into place in 1582 by a guy named Pope Gregory. 1582 was called Year of Our Lord. Remember those old-time movies? You know, with the pirates and the crier comes through town and he's crying out, you know, this year, that year, year of our Lord. Okay. This Gregorian calendar was the establishment by the Catholic Church of what day it was. And what the Gregorian calendar is about is this. I like this part. There. That's our sun. Okay? And around our sun is us. We go around the sun. like that. And we go around the sun every 365 1/4 days. Here, I'm going to put some continents on here, make this is the planet Earth. Yeah, there we go. There. We go around the sun every 365 1/4 days. So our whole concept of time and the very center of our consciousness is about these cycles, repetitive cycles of action. In fact, if you look up time in the dictionary, time equals motion. Motion of physical things. Okay? Now, the Gregorian calendar, I don't know if did you guys study a lot in history or did you go to sleep in history? I went to sleep in history, but I've since gained a really bigger appreciation. But the Gregorian calendar, if you've studied history, you know that the Gregorian calendar did not go down very easily with indigenous people. The Gregorian calendar went out with the Spanish and with the Catholic bishops, and they conquered lands and then told people what day it was. Most civilizations already had their own calendar, see? And then these guys come along and say, no. This is the day. It didn't go down very easy. They had to kill millions and millions of people to get them to follow this Gregorian calendar. And what this Gregorian calendar was all about was the physical measurement of our orbit. And it turns out that this is a very, very insidious tool. You probably never thought that a calendar could be so evil. But what this calendar has done is it has pinned our civilization's consciousness to physical evidence only. The absolute dead center of our civilization is focused on only physical evidence. The measurement of physical objects moving through space. That's why it's not Year of Our Lord anymore. Because there has been a steady erosion of our consciousness of things other than physical. Remember, we used to have religious holidays like Christmas and Easter. Have you noticed that a really good Christmas now is a whole lot of stuff sold to a whole lot of people? Same with Easter. It's a buying, marketing frenzy, isn't it? Especially in the cities, huh? There has been a steady erosion of our consciousness of things other than physical because our calendar has directed our consciousness only in that direction. That is insidious.
So I think then this is not just an indictment of the Gregorian calendar as such, because other solar calendars or lunar calendars that are used in some cultures that are the same. If it's based on the cycles of the moon, it's just as physical, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
An Islamic calendar or Jewish calendar that are lunar, are they just as bad then for that?
They are, but not as concentrated.
Why is the solar calendar worse then?
This particular calendar is worse because now this calendar has been adopted as the commerce calendar. It's the calendar on which all things are bought and sold. Every computer is programmed with this calendar To a certain degree, all those other calendars were physical calendars. They have all gone into less and less use, haven't they? Because they had some spiritual aspects to them. And because they did, they were shunned. They were thrown away. It was all narrowed down to this is the calendar and this is the day. You know what the word dogma means? Anybody out there know what the word dogma means? It doesn't sound like a good word, does it? The word means unquestioned belief. Dogma. Doesn't sound very healthy. You know what the biggest dogma is on earth? What day it is. Nobody even questions it. And if they should, that person's crazy. Yeah, this is a really powerful tool to dominate people's consciousness, which is senior to their body, and it is senior to their actions. You see, there is a cascade of event. It goes like this: consciousness, then light, then thought, then action. Consciousness first, then light, then thought, then the event. In every case, in all ways. So, you control somebody's consciousness, you got them. Soul, mind, and body, you got them. So, here we are, all of us from birth, including our parents and our grandparents from birth, all of us have been brainwashed with this focus. Every one of us, me too, every one of us has been brainwashed. Welcome to the rinse cycle. You see, first of all, you probably heard about other calendars. Like we were talking about the Hebrew calendar, the Islamic calendar. Yeah? Okay. All indigenous calendars, all of the most ancient indigenous calendars, had something in common. All of them were 360 days. 360 days long. Well, the archaeologists, they understand that that is the vague solar year, is what they call it. And they have the opinion that these ancient people were so primitive that they couldn't figure out how long the year was. So they just approximated it into 360 days. Well, the Maya had a 360-day calendar. We're going to be talking a whole lot about it. They also knew exactly how long it took for the Earth to go around the sun. They had a calendar like this, the Hab calendar, which was a 365 and 1/4 day calendar. All these ancient civilizations had 360-day calendars. Maybe they were looking at something other than this motion of Earth around the sun. Maybe they were paying attention to something other than physical evidence. It's possible. We'll take a look. The Maya actually had two calendars at the very center of their civilization. One was called the Zolkin. I'm going to go to the bigger pen. One was called the Zolkin. Spelt like that. This means count, and this means day. So this whole thing means count of days. And the Zolkeen calendar was 260 days long. Those of you who have studied something about the Mayan calendar are probably familiar with this one. This is the astrological calendar of the Maya, or the personal calendar of the Maya. Now, who knows about the astrology part of the calendar? Anybody out there? Oh, okay. One person. Oh, like the astrological thing, the aspects of the Mayan calendar. There is an astrological aspect to this particular calendar. There are 13 intentions on the part of creation. 13 intentions and 20 different aspects of creation that are represented in this calendar. 13 times 20 is 260. So there's a pattern. As a matter of fact, that's what this is right here. This is a tool that I invented and designed and had produced. And what this tool does is it will take the Gregorian calendar, month and day and the year, and transpose it to the Mayan calendar and show you what day it is on the Mayan calendar. Okay? Today happens to be 7 wisdom. 7 is one of the intentions. 7 means alignment with divine will or ethics. And the aspect of creation is wisdom today. So according to the Maya and this calendar, all of creation is resonating with the energies of divine will and wisdom. And that's the purpose of the day. That's the astrological aspect of this 260-day calendar. And by the way, all this information we'll have these in the back later, but all this information, I went to the Maya lands and met with the Maya shaman and had all of this verified by them. So there is the actual traditional information there. See, the Maya, this is a personal calendar. How personal can a calendar be? Well, in the Mayan civilization, your first name was the name of the day that you were born. The Maya had this idea that being as you were spiritual, you had a choice of which day you became physical. You actually had a choice. And why would you pick one day over any other day? Probably because you liked it best. Probably because it agreed with your intention for this life and what you planned to demonstrate as your aspect. So every single person born as a Maya came in knowing exactly why they were here. And everyone else in the society knew exactly why they were here. Wouldn't that have saved us a little bit of trouble? In fact, if you do some study, I did do some study of psychology, and if you do some study of inmates, both in prison and in mental institutions, what the whole problem usually boils right down to is that person was never acknowledged for what they came here for. In a lot of cases, they were blamed, or something was, the reason you're here is to make me miserable, that kind of thing. What they didn't get was acknowledged for why they chose to be here. The Mayan civilization ran very successfully for 5,000 years with this information, all the way up until the Catholic Church showed up and completely destroyed their civilization. The Maya are still there, by the way. There's over 8 million Maya who are living in Guatemala and the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. 8 million. They're not extinct. Not a lot of them follow their ancient traditions anymore, but some do. Then there's another calendar, another Mayan calendar. This calendar was celebrated every single day. Every morning, there were celebrations. Yeah. Question.
Yeah.
Microphone, please.
You just made a statement.
I don't think so. Oh, there it goes.
You just made a statement about 5,000 years.
Yes.
What are you basing that on? What kind of statement is that? What is that?
The 5,000 years?
Yeah.
It was from the pre-classic, and then the classic period, and then the civilization crashed and then went on into the post-classic period. So it was the blending of the Olmec and the Maya. Then we have the Tune calendar. The Tune. This calendar doesn't get talked about very much. Hasn't yet been talked about very much by the archaeologists. They talked about, when you hear about the archaeologists talk about the Mayan calendar, they usually, or the Aztec calendar, they're actually talking about this Hab calendar. It's the one that they understood. This calendar was used for one purpose and one purpose only: taxes. It was the bookkeeping calendar of the Maya. They were an agrarian society, and when could they pay their taxes? When the crops came in. So this calendar was used by the city-states for administration purposes. These two calendars, this was celebrated every day by every person, and this calendar was known as the divine or prophetic calendar of the Maya. Have you heard about the Mayan prophecies and how phenomenally accurate they are and have been? This calendar, this Tune calendar, is where those prophecies were generated. It is a 360-day calendar. We'll be talking mostly about this calendar. I'm going to show you a graphic of how these two work together. This is the 260-day calendar. And here, see if I can do this. Not bad. This is the Zolkin, that's the Tune, and each day on this calendar was like a tooth on a gear, like that. And there's 260 of them. And then over here, there's 360 days on that calendar. As this calendar turns in this direction, like that, it, in turn, revolves this calendar in large cycles. This one just goes around and around and around, and this one goes around in 360-day increments. Every 52 revolutions of this calendar, these two teeth match back up. It was a very special time in the Mayan civilization. To show you how seriously they took all of this, every 52 tune, they would have a celebration, a big celebration, wherein the night before, they would put out every fire and every spark in their whole entire civilization. Every bit of fire was extinguished and was relit at the temples the next morning, and then distributed by the priests to the people and by runners to the villages. And they spread fire throughout their whole civilization once again. All debts were absolved, and they started all over. That's a big commitment, don't you think? Can you imagine purposefully blacking out all the electricity throughout our entire civilization? I mean all the batteries too. No embers. Completely turning off all the electricity because of an event on your calendar. Can you imagine that? Not our civilization. We're looking at something completely differently, aren't we?
When they put out every single fire, was it a 24-hour period that they went from? Like, how long a period was it that you said, like, from, was it dawn to dusk or what?
Yeah, it was put out at night and then started the next morning. All of them every fire was extinguished from like noon on. They put out all the fires, so that night there was no fire. Okay? By the way, an interesting point that I'll touch on it now. We may cover it a little bit more in depth later. The Maya divided each day into 13 hours, not 24 hours. 13 hours. And then they divided those 13 hours, notice 13 intentions. Then they divided the 13 hours into what we would call minutes. Then they divided those 13 minutes into what we would call seconds. And then they divided those 13 seconds by 13, and that by 13, and that by 13, and that by 13, and 13, and 13, and 13, to where every single moment was individually divided by 13, infinitely. That was their understanding. So, this was very, very central to the Mayans' understanding. Note, there are no planets or moons or anything going around our sun every 260 days. There are no planets or moons or any objects going around every 360 days either. Although I guess it's a coincidence that every planet and every galaxy throughout the whole universe, all of them spin in 360 degrees. Our calendar only has to do with our speck of mud going around this little speck of light we call the sun in a sea of 100 billion stars in this one galaxy out of 100 billion galaxies in the universe. So how big is our calendar? Our calendar is completely insignificant. On the other hand, these guys were looking at something a lot bigger. Now, there's a fella by the name of Carl Johan Kalaman. He's a Swedish microbiologist. For 30 years, he's worked in laboratories, looking through microscopes at smaller and smaller particles or parts of life. Okay, very exacting, meticulous work. Most of his work had to do with entomology, with pollution and its effects on the cell and how it causes diseases. That's most of his work. And he was inspired by a visit down to the Maya lands to start studying the Mayan calendar. He took it up as a hobby to begin with, but he started studying it with his clinical techniques to find out what he could prove about the calendar rather than what he thought or conjectured about the calendar, which is what's all been going on so far. All the archaeologists have their own idea, and they kind of match up with other people's ideas about what this was all about. Mr. Coleman took a different route. I myself am an artist, a sculptor. I'm not an archaeologist or didn't even go to school much. I'm an artist, and I was approaching the calendar from more of a heart space or intuitive space. And when I came up with this, Coleman saw it in Sweden, and he sent me this. And we eventually met in Cancun. And when we put our two informations together, the product is this talk. Okay? What Coleman found is what these guys were timing. They certainly weren't timing any physical cycles of things in our solar system. What were they timing? Okay. There's a stone in a place called Koba. I hope you can see this. Maybe you can focus in with the camera on this, so at least it's on the video. This is only one side of the stone. It actually goes over and down like this. It's big. This thing stands 12 feet high out of the ground. I don't know how much it goes into the ground, but it's 12 feet high. It's over 7 feet wide. It's that thick. Big rock. The archaeologists found it in the late 40s, laying face down in the jungle. And when they stood it up, it had all these carvings all over it, all these Mayan dates, and a king who stands right here. But all of these dates have to do with the tune calendar. It's numbers of those cycles, okay? Numbers of times those cycles have happened. And it's big, big numbers. We'll be talking about it in a minute. When the stone was first stood up, the archaeologists did a rubbing of, a charcoal rubbing. And it's a good thing they did, because when the stone dried out from having laid in the jungle for so long, it just, you can't read it now. Madeline and I have been there. We've stood right by the stone. I kissed the stone. I really did. And you can't read anything on it. In fact, when it was first rubbed, the archaeologists didn't know what it meant either. But since we have then translated the writing, and now we can read it with the aid of computers, you can read it just like a newspaper. And what that stone says is the structure of the Mayan calendar. The Mayan calendar is in 9 different levels. Okay, does that look like a pyramid to you? That's good. That's why all those pyramids down there are all 9 levels. Because those big structures that the Maya built out of stone were ceremonial centers to approximate or to show people the progression up this ladder or up these steps. I'm going to write bigger. It also shows that each one of these levels is subdivided into 13 individual sections. Now there goes that top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. On the Mayan calendar, there are 7 periods of light in each one of these levels. There's 7 periods of light. And there's 6 periods of dark. 7 days and 6 nights to each level of creation. Where have we heard that before? Genesis? As a matter of fact, the Mesopotamians and the Sumerians, the first people to write, wrote in cuneiform form on clay tablets that each level of creation had 7 days and 6 nights. So the Maya weren't the first people to have this information. There were other civilizations earlier. But the Maya were the most recent ancient civilization. They left the freshest tracks, which is why Coleman and I have picked up on it. Okay? The days, each day is a period of enlightenment or increase in consciousness. And each night is a period of applying that consciousness. You've done that all your life. You've learned something new and then went out and applied it, haven't you? You get all excited about something you just learned, and then you run out and you do it. Interesting, during that application, sometimes you learn what you didn't already know. These are called mistakes. Where you go out, you get all excited, and you learn about it. Remember, guys, when we first learned about hammer, wood, and nails? And how to put things together, and just pounding boards together. And you, bam! Ow! Now you know something more than you did before. We'll see that sometimes during this application stage, there's things that look like mistakes. But it's all part of the learning process, isn't it? So this very first cycle that was carved some 2,500 years ago on this rock started 16.4 billion, that's billion with a B, billion years ago. This is why this information hasn't been studied by the archaeologists. The archaeologists could not conceive of why Indians making pots in the jungle would have any business thinking about 16.4 billion years. So they just put it on the shelf and nobody else looked at it until Coleman came along. In fact, when this stone was unearthed, the astronomers, you know, the guys that was looking out into the galaxies, they had postulated that the universe, the Big Bang, happened somewhere between 20 and 10 billion years ago. And then later, as we got better and better telescopes, we could see further out into the, and then they went, well, no, it wasn't 20, it was like 12 billion years ago, and that was it. So this was impossible. Well, now we've updated Hubble, and we've found that there are things out there 14.5 billion years old. I bet you that in the next few years, we're going to find out that the Maya had it right on. That the Big Bang happened 16.4 billion of our years ago. Understand that this is an exact number of tunes of 360-day cycles, but when you work it to our year, it gets to a fraction. Okay. This whole cycle, 16.4 billion years, is divided into 13 different sections. Each one of them 1.26 billion years long. So a day in this cycle was 1.25 billion years. And each night lasted for 1.25 billion years. Okay? Each one of these has a particular intention in creation. We won't go into that right now, but each one of them has a particular intention. And has followed all these intentions all the way across. This cycle has a name for its product, what it produced. It's called the cellular cycle, because way over here at the very, very end, in this last section, in the 7th day, what happened 1.26 billion years ago is the first live cell on this planet. Now, up until that time, consciousness was very busy. Consciousness was busy creating or doing business. You know, it had a particular mode by which it was operating. And it was operating in the mode of action, reaction. I'll just abbreviate it here. But action, reaction was this whole cycle. Chemical, gravitational, frictional, all of the physical laws that we understand and still use today, all of those things were established from the Big Bang forward. Then we'll go through some of the detail of what happened in these in just a minute. The very next cycle, carved on that rock, started 820 million years ago. 820 million years ago. And it started going through these same 13 steps. Each one of those steps taking 63.4 million years each. This one was 1.26 billion years each. This one's only 63.4 million years each. Yes?
A day to a day?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. And the answer is, creation has the deck stacked in consciousness's favor. We go from a day to another day. Okay? This whole cycle, 820 million years, fits very tidily into 1.26 billion, doesn't it? This whole cycle fits in that box very comfortably. Does that make sense? So we got all the way over here to this last light, and then we got another light. And this started a whole nother process. This has a name for its product. Mammalian cycle. Why? Because 63.4 million years ago, what happened? The first live births. Now back here, right at this line, individual cells started clumping together for cooperation for better survival. And then they evolved stage by stage by stage into more and more complex organisms. And when you go to study this on your own, because we're not going to drag you through all the detail, or we might as well just talk about the book, you know. It's better for you to study the detail on your own. But you'll find that all the developments of individual cells into shell life, into fishes, into reptiles, into birds, and finally into mammals and then us, all of that went stage by stage by stage. It's not a coincidence. We're on a schedule. And it's provable by the historic record, the paleontological record. You have the center right here, the mastodons and what's called the Bernage. Yeah. What is it again? Beringia? Beringia Center. And you can go and confirm this for yourself. Here we go. This whole consciousness cycle had a way of doing business too. It's called stimulus response. All of this consciousness was building on a survival tool or a method called stimulus response. It's still working now. That's because we're still living in this 1.26 billion years. And those laws that were established then are still working. That's a level of consciousness, a foundation. Here, we built the consciousness of stimulus response and mammals. I see a whole lot of mammals out there. We're still living in this 63.4 million years. The next cycle started 41 million years ago. It's called the familiar cycle. Familial. It has to do with the families. Monkeys showed up 40 million years ago, right near the very beginning of this cycle. And what monkeys did is they brought along a consciousness, the consciousness of stimulus, individual response. Individual response. Down here we had hives and nests and swarms and schools and herds and flocks. And you've seen enough wildlife to know if you startle them, the whole herd, boom, off like a shot, right? The whole school of fish, the whole pile of ants. It's all stimulus response, everybody goes. In this case, though, in these stages, each one of them 3.2 million years long, the monkeys and their ancestors and their ancestors and their ancestors built the concept of family. What's the difference between a family and a herd? The recognition of the individual. And it is definitely a survival tool. You're much more flexible as an individual, much more choice of how to survive rather than being one of the pack. Right now, I dare say, in our societies and world, there are a lot of people who would have you give up your individuality. Get in line, sit down, shut up, and become one of the pack. Don't do it. Creation has invested a lot into you attaining your individuality. Don't throw it away. Thanks. Okay, 2 million years ago, we started a new cycle. This is called the tribal cycle. Not so coincidentally, 2 million years ago, right at this line, Australopithecus showed up, the first tailless ape. A really distant ancestor of ours. But as we came through all these 13 stages, we went further and further toward Homo erectus and then Homo sapien, which showed up 160,000 years ago. Each one of these is 160,000 years. So 160,000 years ago was the beginning of this seventh day, and that is when Homo sapien showed up. We are on a schedule. Now this whole cycle was producing a certain kind of consciousness or a tool for survival, and that was similarities and differences. The mind. Here, we put down the tail and picked up the mind as a survival tool. The tail was a very useful survival tool down here. Down here, fangs and claws were good. But here, the tail, here, the mind. And the mind is a tool to look or notice the similarities and differences in things and in circumstances. Not to just react, but to decide. Okay? To decide. Much more powerful tool for survival. Then, 102,000 years ago, we started another cycle, the cultural cycle. This too, this cultural cycle had its own brand of consciousness. And this brand of consciousness was reasons. Now, it started off in the caves, way back here, 102,000 years ago. People huddled around the fire in front of the cave. And one guy, who eventually would become called the shaman, he came up with the reasons for things. He came up with the reason for rain, the reason for stars, the reason for the moon, the reason for fire. He had the reasons. If you really, really look at it, the basis of culture is shared reasons. Like an Islamic person, the reason he lives is for Allah. A Christian, he lives for Christ. That's his reason. The foundation of all cultures is shared reasons for things. And what happened here is these cycles, each one of these different divisions, each of them being almost, I'm rounding it up, but they're almost 8,000 years for each one of these days or nights. What happened way over here, 8,000 years ago, we developed agriculture. Agriculture. Well, there have been lots of them, actually, along the way. So, here we are, next cycle. 3115 BC is when this one started. It's called the national cycle, because the modern nation was produced from this consciousness. Each one of these steps or stages is 397, almost 400 years. 3115 BC, by the way, is when we learned to write. So all of this is her story, and from here on up, it's his story. Also, right on this line, right on that line, is when King Minos of the Upper and Lower Nile cultures married the two cultures into the first nation called Egypt. Right there. And ever since then, there has been this evolution of the concept of nations, borders, tariffs, armies. Law. Law. This whole consciousness was about law. And if you have studied the Hebrew Bible, this 3115 BC date is awfully close to when the Hebrew Bible states Adam and Eve were kicked out of the Garden of Eden and into the consciousness of right and wrong, crime and punishment. You see, down here, there wasn't right or wrong. There was just reasons. There was reasons for things. There were certainly consequences for your actions. They happened for reasons. But there wasn't a law. There wasn't some guy going to come and beat your head in. You know? It was natural happenstances and natural consequences rather than human-imposed sanctions. That started right there and has evolved to where we are right now. And we'll go into just a little bit of detail about these different cycles, how they evolved. The next one is called the planetary consciousness. It started in 1755 AD. Remember your European history? What was happening 1755 AD? Ooh, the Industrial Revolution started in Europe. Each one of these days and nights were 19.7 of our years. Okay? Each one of these days and nights. And this whole consciousness cycle from 1755 up to today and into tomorrow is all about one thing: power. Raw, unmitigated power. This is when we started coming up with machines to do the work of men and animals. The water wheels, and then steam power, and then electrical power, and then internal combustion, and then nuclear, and it has evolved stage by stage by stage. We're on a schedule. This line right here, this line, the beginning of this seventh day, was 1992. What happened in 1992? www.com. The internet went up in 1992, manifesting a planetary consciousness. It is now a global consciousness. And it turned on right there at the very beginning of the seventh day. Either we've got a 16.4 billion year long string of coincidence, or we're on a schedule. The next cycle on that rock is one that we've just recently started. It's called the galactic consciousness cycle. If you think I'm kidding, get over that. Do we have a national consciousness? Are we living as part of that? Do we have a planetary consciousness? The galactic consciousness cycle started January 5th, 1999. And ever since then, we've been finding lots more out about our galaxy, haven't we? We're now finding other planets around other stars. We've now mapped our entire galaxy. We now know the density of the center of the galaxy. We have discovered the black hole in the center. We're finding out a lot more, much, much quicker than ever before. And these days and nights, each day and each night lasts for 360 days. I saw some light bulbs go on out there. Let me go ahead and do this one right here. I'm going to go into what is coming. There's another cycle coming. The universal consciousness cycle. Again, I'm not kidding. universal consciousness cycle. It begins on February 10th, 2011. During this consciousness cycle, each one of these shifts and changes will last for, or will take 20 days. This ethical, this galactic consciousness cycle started January 5th, 1999. It has a type of consciousness that it is operating under or developing. And that type of consciousness, in case you haven't already noticed, ethics. What is happening to the power elite corporations that are in power across this planet? What is happening to them right now?
They're getting in hot water.
They're getting in a lot of hot water. Their ethics are being put in, aren't they? Yes?
Something that I've noticed is I've myself have gotten involved in a few different MLM companies and been watching what's been going on. And it's really interesting how a company will start up and they seem to have integrity and everybody says, oh, this is great, and they all jump on board. And the minute they lose integrity, it is amazing how many people just are gone from that company, lost their integrity, they have no ethics, and people are leaving them in masses.
Yes. Consciousness is not just us. Consciousness is this pen, the air you're breathing, the tree standing outside. Consciousness is all of creation. It's not just people. Consciousness is everything. Just a moment. Really get the mic over here. Consciousness is everything, and everything is oriented to ethics. Yes?
What was the event that precipitated the advent of the galactic consciousness?
There wasn't, a consciousness first, then event. It goes consciousness, light, thought, event. Well, remember what you were doing January 5th? January 5th of 99? Do you remember what you were doing? As a matter of fact, that's when you were first hearing about Y2K. That's when that consciousness that your systems that you're dependent upon are not all that reliable was planted during that period of time. That consciousness that the power you rely on is not the end all of your existence, and that it could all go away in just a microsecond. That consciousness was January 5th, 1999, if you were looking for an event, okay. And we've come further and further along. Right now, by the way, right now we're in this cycle. We're in the third night. We'll talk much more in depth about this particular stage that we're in right now. In this cycle, we're down there. Okay? This universal consciousness cycle will have its own purpose, and that purpose is conscious co-creation. Conscious co-creation. Now, it's pretty evident that we are already co-creating our experience. For instance, if you weren't here, this event wouldn't be happening, would it? If any one of you were gone, it wouldn't be the same experience, would it? So we are all co-creating our experience all of the time. We're usually not as conscious about it as we could be, though. And where this is all leading is to our full ability to consciously co-create our experience. That's a big idea. And we're going to build some more groundwork on how that happens and how it can possibly happen. Can we have the microphone, please?
But if the very last level of the whole thing, it only runs part of a year.
Yeah, 260 days. This whole cycle is 260 days long. The question was, okay, after that 260 days, then what? You have to wait. We're going to get to that during this talk. We're going to get right to it, okay? I promise. The whole Mayan calendar comes to a screeching halt. It ends completely on October 28th, 2011. Every one of these cycles comes to a boom stop on that day. You will know what happens and why, as best as we can be explained. But there's some explaining to do before we get there. Okay? Now, the way this works is, you've noticed that there's a constant acceleration here. Maybe some of you have noticed that time seems to be speeding up. Yes? Well, that's not exactly true. Time is not speeding up. Creation is. There's more and more event in less and less time than ever before. And it's going to keep on accelerating. And keep on accelerating. You want to have a very personal experience of how much change there is between here and here? You want to know? Because all of you have a very direct experience of how much consciousness shift there is between one of these days and the next night, or then that night and the next day. Every one of you were born during this period, during the end of this planetary cycle, when things were changing once every 19.7 years. You were born to a couple of really nice people called your parents. And up until you were 13, 15 years old, everything was going along just fine. Then you started noticing something. And you know, those people who claimed that they were your parents, those embarrassments that like loaded you up in the car and took you places. Remember that? That difference of point of view. You knew for sure, and whether you did it politely or not so politely, you knew for sure that you were more capable of handling situations and new information than your parents ever could or ever would. This was called the generation gap when people were talking about that sort of thing. And studies were done all over about how long the generation gap was, and they came out with the idea that it was 20 years long. There. That's how much consciousness shift there is between one of these days and one of those nights. what used to happen in 19.7 years, the amount of change that happened in 19.7 years now happens every 360 days. Does that answer a couple of questions of why you feel a little overwhelmed from time to time? Get used to it. Or get over it. We are the Prozac nation. This is why we're going to talk in depth about that. The reason I said either get used to it or get over it is because here, what used to take almost a year, the same amount of change will be happening every 20 days. You guys, some of you out there are the age where you would have gone to school for a career. You know, invested years of your life toward a particular career. Maybe you're on your third. By the time we get up into here, forget about it. Not that far away at all. This is a real situation. And this is really why we have these talks. Because without an understanding, without some plausible understanding of what it is that is happening not just to you, but to everybody, it's really difficult to handle it. And the more people do understand, and the more in depth you understand, the easier it's going to be to go through these transitions. You see, there's two things that are going on here. And then I'm going to go into some more detail, a little bit more detail. There's the good things and there's bad things. The bad is that you were getting overwhelmed. The good is that there's more and more possible to occur all the time. Things that were completely impossible, miracles, things that would never happen back here, now are your daily life, like cell phones, for instance. Video phones, that kind of thing. So I want to take and show you that this process, it's like a constant acceleration. I mean, a constant from here all the way through it accelerates. And then it starts accelerating from here and it goes in faster and faster and faster. But each time it's 20 times faster. And you're going to go faster and faster and faster and faster until you're getting going as fast as you can in that gear. Then what do? You put in the clutch. That's this point right here. You put in the clutch, you reach for another gear, you let out the clutch, and you accelerate into that next gear. Very mechanical. I hope that that builds a good picture, because what we're going to be talking about. It accelerated from the Big Bang, accelerated faster and faster and faster, all the way up to this fifth day. Now you understand that things were bashing into one another and blending in solar systems, exploding and all that, all the way up till about 5 billion years ago, which was this fifth day. What happened then? That was the birthday of our solar system. In every one of these fifth days, it's the biggest opening for consciousness of the whole deal. It races up to that point and then, wow! Okay? So it go, 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 all the way up till this period, and then the solar system was formed. That's a big event for all of us. Then, during this fifth night, that's when everything gets applied, right? What happened? 250 million years of meteor bombardment. All the leftover junk in the solar system started plowing into all the formed planets. And the moons. Luna still has all the scars. All of the other planets without atmospheres still have the craters on them. Ours are a little bit toned down, but the big Hudson Bay is a crater from that period of time. There are many, there's about 5 major ones on this planet. They're still pretty prominent. Those meteors just plowed into everything. Good thing they did too, because every drop of water on this planet came in with those comets. Every single drop. If that didn't happen, your bodies would be really small, because you're like 87% water. Yes?
Hi. I've been watching some of your tapes and previous talks, and I remember when you brought this out, I was thinking, okay, my question would be like, okay, with the book that you brought out by Dr. Kalaman, is this where all of this information is coming from? I mean, I never learned that kind of thing in school.
Yeah. Well, no, actually,
So
the information, both of us have done a lot of research.
So it's there's scientific backup on all of this.
Absolutely.
Scientific proof of all of that, yeah.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay.
There is scientific proof of everything that we're talking about. If it is not, I'm going to say it's conjecture. Because there's one coming up, as a matter of fact, a conjecture. So, that's what happened. Big breakthrough and then big bombs. Okay? Then, in this cycle, this 5th day, 315 million years ago, what happened is life took a walk on the beach. Everything back here is underwater. All the development of life was underwater. In the 5th day, the animals started crawling out onto the beach. Life moved to the land. 315 million years ago. Look it up. Then, during the 5th night, 97% of all life went extinct. In the Perm-Triassic extinction period. Pow! Another one of those comets. Slammed into the earth, and 97% of all life was eradicated. The only thing left was little squiggly worms in the mud at the bottom of oceans. And it all evolved back. We have the paleontological records of all of this. Up here, in this familiar section, during the 5th day, this is when life scientists conjecture that color vision was installed in mammals. Color vision came in right then. And right here, during this 5th night, we don't know what happened. We don't have any conclusive data of anything that occurred there, but the monkeys made it, or we wouldn't be here. Whatever they went through. But here in the tribal cycle, this 5th day is 800,000 years ago. And something very special happened during this 5th day. Very important. Fire. It's when the Homo erectus got the consciousness of fire. All over the world, all the different places, it was sort of like the 100th monkey syndrome. Within some 3,500, 4,000 years, everybody had the consciousness of fire during that 5th day. It's a really good thing, too, because 68,000 years ago, 680,000 years ago, we had the Ionian Ice Age. During the 5th night. What is consciousness doing here? It looks like we're getting supplied exactly what we need to go to the next step, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Okay, up here, 40,000 years ago, in the cultural cycle, was the development of art. cave paintings, stone carvings, wood carvings, some of the petrified wood carvings they found. Art. There were tools way back here, but art. Art was very, very important because art was the consciousness of future. It was the first expression of future. You know, they didn't sit around the fire carving this effigy of a pregnant woman. You've seen that goddess, right? They didn't sit around carving that because somebody had become pregnant. They were doing it so that there would be pregnancies. They didn't stand there and paint on the walls what they had just done with the bison. They were stating that as a prayer. It was magic. It was shamanism. They were predicting their future. Why did a caveman wear a bear claw on his, or tiger's tooth or whatever? It wasn't so much a totem of what he had accomplished. It was so the next time he met a bear, he'd go, look at that. He was looking into the future, to use that power in the future for his survival. And that's what art was all about. It wasn't decorative. It was shamanic for the future. Then, 32,000 years ago, was the fifth night. And what happened 32,000 years ago? Neanderthal went extinct. Do you know why Neanderthal went extinct? Have you watched that National Geographic special or studied any of it? Well, the archaeologists finally figured out why they did go extinct. It was very simple. They never changed. For 100,000 years, they used the same tools, chasing the same bison, living in the same caves in the same valley. They never changed. They didn't travel. They wore the same style of clothing. When they were interacting when they started interacting with Homo erectus, then they started actually copying some of the jewelry and things. But they never took off because they never did art on their own. They couldn't imagine a future. So they didn't have one. They never changed. So they were off the bus. Take a clue. Okay. Back here in the national cycle, this date right here is 40 AD. This line is 40 AD. What was happening 40 AD? Who had just died? Jesus had just a little while before, yeah. But he was here and he had a certain message for everybody. And that message basically was, you're all divine. Every single one of you are the sons and daughters of God. And no one has any business getting in between you and him to do your speaking for you. No king, no priest, no governor, no one has any space between you and God. That was his basic message. And that message, remember these is 397 years, almost 400 years. Here we go. We'll draw it like that. During this period of time, the message of Christ, not him, but his message was spreading out all over the world. That consciousness was being spread over that 400 years. And right here, this time period, the fifth night, was started at 4:16. Actually, it started 4:13. In 416, Rome fell. The most powerful nation on earth, the empire of Rome, fell. What the heck happened here? Did the swords go dull? Did the shields just fold up? What happened? Consciousness is what happened. The consciousness that Caesar was not a god, nor any of the emperors. That each person had his own voice. And that Rome was, frankly, very far away. So F you, Rome, you know? We're going alone, is what happened. It was individual consciousness that brought that down. It was the recognition of this truth that destroyed that. It was the application of this information that undermined the authority of Rome. Can't happen again, though, could it? Not in our lifetimes. Okay, the power, or planetary cycle. This line right here, the fifth day, is 1913. What happened right then? E equals mc squared. Einstein's work was being published. And the general public and the scientific public were being apprised of this new understanding. Boy, there is the blueprint of our reality. That's a big opening for consciousness, huh? And then 1924, I mean right down the very center of that 20 years, 1924, Mr. Hubble discovered that we live in an infinite universe. Before that, you see, people thought that the Milky Way was all of creation. Mr. Hubble discovered that there are other galaxies and that they are accelerating away from us faster and faster, and that we live in an infinite universe. In an infinite universe, absolutely everything is possible, isn't it? Nothing impossible in infinity. Now there's an opening for consciousness. Wide open. Okay, what do you do with that when you're going to apply it? Well, that line right there is 1932. And we went and applied all that acceleration and understanding in an exercise we call World War II. World War II, where we blew off the atomic bomb. And brought upon ourselves the weight of the responsibility that we could be the last. That's been a heavy weight. That's been part of your consciousness since you grew up. It's been a heavy weight. But I do want to point out something very important. As bad as all that waste and horror of World War II, it sure as hell wasn't 250 million years of meteor bombardment, was it? As a matter of fact, in World War II, 97% of all life did not go extinct, did it? You know, some people worried about, when the bomb went off, that it would cause a nuclear winter. An ice age, global-wide, didn't happen. As much as much as Hitler hated the Jewish people, they did not go extinct like the Neanderthal, did they? And when the Third Reich fell, there wasn't 30 years of war that raged across Europe, like when Rome fell. In other words, folks, things are getting better. Dramatically better. Now, sure, our expectations have risen also. Like right now, animals have rights. Back here, you women didn't have any rights. You were animals. You were property. You understand? Things are getting better, dramatically better. And you should expect it to get even better. Go ahead. That little bit of dissatisfaction is worth it. So this all is accelerating, going up. And it's going by stages. And it's getting faster and faster and faster. Now remember 2 million years ago, we picked up this tool called the mind? Well, we're going to have a little bit of problem with that thing. And I want to talk about that right now. The mind. The mind is a tool. And it's a tool that consciousness uses to distinguish similarities and differences between things. Okay? It is a tool, like a hammer or a saw. A carpenter doesn't think that he's his hammer. Well, not most of them. I know some guys that think they're their car, but that's not true. Some people think that they are their mind. Get over that right away. You are not your mind or any of your thoughts. If you do hold to that, you're going to be in big trouble, and I'm going to show you. See, the mind, you don't hear about this in school either. You don't hear, especially don't hear about this kind of information. I took psychology classes, and no one in college ever talked to me about the flicker frequency. You ever heard of it? Flicker frequency? The reason you haven't heard of it is because this flicker frequency is very, very important in subliminal advertising, which of course you would never have experienced yourself. The mind works on a series of pictures. Well, special effects people know all about this. The flicker frequency. The flicker frequency is 24 frames per second. That's how fast your mind works. Your mind has a speed limit. Your mind can only think 24 thoughts in 1 second. It can only make this action 24 times per second. So it goes like a flip card strip. Here's a ball, and the ball's coming, and it's coming, and it's coming, and it bounces here, boom, and it looks like this. And then here it comes again, and it's going to bounce again. Right? That's how the mind actually works. Has anybody here been in an accident? Well, I don't want to bring up bad times, but something that was really dangerous. I mean, you could have died. And did you see time slow down when you were in that accident? Yeah? Okay. Anybody see it go to stop motion? That was serious. What you just witnessed, and for those, maybe some of you kind of have that, and maybe not. I'm telling you, and you guys, I'll bet you will confirm it, these were peak experiences in your life. You still clearly remember exactly what happened, don't you? Oh, yeah. And the reason that was so powerful an experience is because it was a demonstration that you are not your mind. That your consciousness is not limited to how fast this thing works. Very powerful information. This flicker frequency, 24 frames per second, is as fast as your mind can work. The mind is a tool supposed to do a job of seeing the similarities and differences so that you can make decisions concerning your survival. Now, when the mind, which is a self-preservating mechanism, when the mind understands that it can't do its job or it's not adequately able to make good decisions about your future, it's got a built-in, evolved-in safety override. A safety override system. And it goes in stages. The first stage of that safety override is called stress. When your mind is not sure of what's coming, it sends your body a signal. This is your walk away response. You're supposed to get up and walk away. Animals have this down really good. A dog will smell something weird and just get up and leave. Us, on the other hand, we have had parents and teachers and now employers who would not have us just get up and walk away, right? So, we have adapted to stress. As a matter of fact, stress is a character evaluation on you. How much stress can you handle? That's right. Because if you could handle more stress, you'd go further up the corporate ladder. That's really what the glass ceiling is on each person, is how much stress can you handle?
I was just going to say that most disability companies no longer have stress as a reason for being away from work. You cannot get that coverage anymore.
Right.
As of 2 years ago.
Meanwhile, doctors, the AMA proclaims that 80% of everything that goes wrong with your body begins with stress. Stress is such an epidemic proportion that all the benefits that used to be afforded to workers for stress have been cut off. Everybody's got stress. It's a pandemic. Now you guys kind of have a clue as to why. You know, if you make a telephone call, you're hooked up to computers that are making something like 4 to 5 billion decisions per second. Your mind is doing 24. Consciousness is moving at least 5 billion decisions per second. You understand that consciousness is as fast as you can realize? So now we're talking about nanoseconds, which is 1/1000th of a second. I mean 100,000th of a second. Wow. Consciousness has just sped away from your mind. It used to be when this territory was settled, the people who settled it built everything in their house. From the foundation to the floor, to the windows, to the bunk bed, to the chairs, the tables, everything they built with their own hands, didn't they? Except maybe the pump and the skillet. Everything else, they built it. They had a certain amount of knowing about all of that. They knew about how to do it. Go ahead, go home and build a light bulb. That kind of thing is a source for stress. When your computer goes down, there's a whole lot that the mind doesn't know about. And it generates this stress. It's, like I said, it's a pandemic everywhere. Okay, so you're supposed to handle the stress. You're supposed to adapt to stress. And the stress builds. And we've just seen that this acceleration continues to accelerate, right? So what's next? If you don't handle the stress, then you go into this. The mind does this. It goes into the fight or flight. Now, here, all logic, this is suspended. There is no similarity or difference anymore. It's just a drop of adrenaline in your system, and the body is supposed to either run away or fight its way out to preserve your idea of survival. That's the mechanism. This, though, this fight or flight, this is desk rage. This is road rage. This is Columbine High School. This is terrorism. And all wars. That's what this is. And that is on the massive increase, isn't it? So what happens if you can't fight your way out, you can't run away? For instance, if you go and punch the boss in the nose, or your teacher, then you're going to end up in jail or at least out of a job, right? So if you can't fight your way out, you can't run away, what's left? This. Oh, I want bigger. There's one last-ditch effort on the part of the mind to survive this. Unconsciousness. If you can't run away or fight your way out, unconscious. What are you supposed to do if a bear attacks you? You're supposed to play dead. Maybe he'll only eat your arm. You've seen other animals use that technique, haven't you? Just, they get caught and they just turn over on their back, put their belly up in the air and their legs, and they play dead. It is a survival tactic. It just also happens to be the mother of all addictions and the father of all suicides. Basically, this is a denial of experience. And the Southern Belle don't faint dead away. Thump. What happened here? No one clubbed this woman in the head. She just decided to deny the experience. Didn't she? All addictions are a person's chosen method to remain unconscious. And it doesn't matter if it's alcohol, or if it's drugs, or if it's work, or gambling, or shopping, or sitcoms. All addictions are a chosen method to stay unconscious. And how many people do you know, yourself excluded, are stuck in that sort of thing? A whole bunch of people, huh? Are you starting to get the impact of what this acceleration means? 400 years ago, people had lots of time to sit and ponder things before they changed. In 400 years, you had lots of 24th of a second to work it out. But now, it's not that way. And it's going to get faster and faster on everybody you know. including yourself. This is a serious situation. This is why the world looks like it's going to pieces, because it is. The mind was not built for speed. It was evolved when things were going a lot slower. You know, trying to keep your mind up to speed is sort of like taking your donkey for a run behind the family station wagon at 75 miles an hour. It's just not pretty. But that's what's happening to everyone. And it's going to get even more dramatic in the future. We're going to talk about the Mayan calendar. And it's a bit, we're not talking about Indians in the pyramids. You know, we're talking about what is going on in our lives today and what's going to happen tomorrow. And we're going to go into, from this point on, how to resolve the situation that we've discovered. Okay? And how you can take this out to your friends and neighbors and help them to resolve it too. Because you want to have some company, don't you? So we've got this situation, and I think you all, it's registering on you, isn't it? So now, it's pretty evident that we are all going to be going completely out of our minds. It's going to happen. So we might as well go ahead and look at what's out there, outside of your mind. What's out there is your intuition. What is outside of your own mind is your intuition, your own personal knowing, your own personal power. Intuition. This intuition, your own knowing, without having to rely on any outside information or evidence whatsoever, was made a death sentence by the Catholics during the Inquisition. They murdered over 4 million women for having intuition. Yes?
Just for the record, I'd like to say that there was a news story came over the media within, I think, about the last week, where the Pope was asking for forgiveness what the Catholic Church had done during the Inquisition.
Well, should we go ahead and forgive him? I think so.
I don't even know where all the bodies are buried.
Where the what?
The bodies are buried.
Oh, they're gone. Those 4 million women, anybody who professed to know something without first producing the actual physical evidence on how they came to know it, was declared a witch. And they were burned and dragged and stabbed and they were persecuted. And as a result, intuition went out of style. We just put it on the shelf. The Catholics knew what they were doing, because this is your personal power. It's your own power. And you know the law of supply and demand. If everybody's got power, then what's mine worth? If nobody's got power and I've got it, mine's worth a whole lot more. And that's what they were doing to everybody. And that caught on and has been brought forward to the situation we're in right now. And thank you, Pope, for asking for forgiveness. It's about time. Actually, it's perfect time, because we can now afford to forgive them, because there's a larger understanding of what has been going on over all this period. There is no fault here. There is a process. You know, Hitler, right here, was just doing his job. Bushies, the Bushies right now, Bush and Rumsfeld, Ashcroft, all those guys, they're doing a great job. They really are. Anybody want their job? Go, guys. They are tearing down everything that the power structure stands for in record time. Go, guys! We got to get this stuff out of the way. And they're doing a wonderful job of it. Intuition. You know, we pay athletes a lot of money, don't we? To play silly games. Don't we? I mean, it's almost ludicrous, almost crazy how much we pay. Millions of dollars a year to go out and play a game? Are we nuts? Maybe not. Because, you see, these athletes, when they're out there, under very stressful conditions, I mean, playing for a national championship with all kinds of money and your next year's career on the line, plus endorsements and all that, and under tremendous stress, instead of going into the fight or flight syndrome, which would have them kicked off the court or off the team, instead of doing that, these guys routinely go into the zone. And they make the spectacular play. Under tremendous stress, with everything happening all at once, they just go step back, see and know everything about the moment. Have you read any of those interviews with the quarterbacks or the hockey players who see the play in slow motion? Have you heard about that? That's how they stay in the game. By being in the zone. Riding their intuition. There is no time to think about it. If you think about it, you've lost. When a quarterback starts thinking about the game, he's second string, third string, and out there making commercials. Being in the zone, being in their intuition, is why we pay them the money. Because they're doing something that we know is vitally important. Something that we admire. We admire it. That's why we pay for it. Those clothes that you're wearing, I'll bet at some time or another, you bought them. And the reason that you paid anything for it is because you admired that apparel. And the more you admire something, the more it's worth to you and the more you'll pay. And that's really the basis of all exchange. Is how much it is admired. You can even admire how much you hate something, or how much distaste you have for it, or how ugly something is. You can admire how ugly something is, can't you? God, that's ugly. It's an amount of admiration. In fact, it's what beings exchange. Beings exchange admiration rather than money or thoughts or communication. They really exchange admiration between one another. You want to know where economy is moving to? It's moving away from money, isn't it? And it's moving into the exchange of admiration rather than physical goods. But this intuition, being in the zone, is very, very important. And since we're all going to be going out of our minds, oh, you'll still have one. You know? It's sort of like you still have, we still have bodies, you know, we're using those as a vehicle, you know. You'll still have a mind, and you can still add 2 and 2 and that kind of thing. But when it comes down to dealing with changes and the amount of rapid change that's coming, this is the only thing that will work. You will not have time to think it through. You will only have time to take the action. And when you're thinking, when you're using the mind, what's also in there is all the fears, doubts, worry. Okay? Big clue. How do you know it's your intuition and not your mind? Your intuition is always, no matter what the circumstance, and you guys that were in the accidents, remember? When you were engaged in your intuition, there was no fear. There was a calm certainty, a knowing of what to do. There was no time to worry about whether you were doing this right or wrong. It was direct action. Your intuition, no matter what or how dire the circumstances, your intuition will always be calm and knowing. Your mind, on the other hand, will throw in the kitchen sink. I've talked to some people who shared experiences with these accidents and whatnot. They made it through the experience, and other passengers in the car or companions didn't survive the situation. And these people knew exactly why they didn't survive. I mean, the passengers didn't survive, and they did. It was because they personally stayed right there in the moment, while the passenger was going, "Oh! No, I'm denying this is happening at all." They were in their mind. The survivor was in their intuition. That's how important this is. 9/11 is a big topic. 9/11, who survived, who didn't? The people who followed their intuition and went fishing that morning, instead of to work, survived. The people who got down out of the buildings when the first plane hit, and even including in the second tower, the people who got out of the buildings, followed their intuition, took a break, went home, they survived. The people who got out of the buildings then heard the all clear, and their boss reminding them that they had customers on the West Coast that they should be selling stuff to, and then got back in the elevators and went back up into the buildings, didn't survive. What was the difference? The guys that went back up in the building had a reason. They had reasons for going back in the building. I got to make my mortgage payment. You know, the kids got to go to summer school. They had reasons. I would get fired if I didn't go back. They had reasons, and they were in their mind rather than following their intuition. Just some examples. But this is going to become more and more critical as we go forward from here. More and more critical. Now, next problem. How do you find your intuition? And how do you keep it tuned in? Because of course, we've all had the experience, right? We've all had the experience of our intuition. Usually, it's fleeting. It's a little thing, and then it goes away. And then it's clouded with all this doubt about, was that even my own thought, or, you know, all that stuff, right? The mind just jumps right on you, and This mind thing is not your friend, friends. It's a parasitic, self-indulgent, self-preservation mechanism. It would rather be right than you be alive. The mind. You've probably had friends who denied that there was anything wrong with them because the mind said, that can't happen, that can't be there, nope, it's not right. It wouldn't go for treatment, let alone alternative treatment, and they're not here anymore. They were right until they actually kicked it. This is not a fairy tale. I mean, the mind would rather be right in a lot of people than be alive. So, getting a good grip on this thing is really important. And having this engaged really puts the mind in its place, where it becomes just a tool rather than an identity. So, how do you do that? Well, intuition is your own personal knowing. Right? And all knowing comes from a source. We don't have to give it a name even. It just comes from somewhere. And it comes in a flow, more or less. It's like there we go. We'll have this flow of creation. See, the source of this flow would necessarily be the source of all knowing, because all that happens is coming out, all that exists is coming this way. So, here we have your consciousness in this flow of event. Okay? Here we go. Like this. Oh boy, it's getting quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker and quicker. Your consciousness is oriented by time and place. In this flow. Have you noticed that when you have an intuitive moment, it seems like time doesn't go by at all? Until way later and you go, wow, where'd all the time go? But for that time, you were just being there. In one moment, just like it was a flow. Okay? This is the schematic of how this works. When you're in your intuition, you're centered in that flow of information. The trick is to stay there. It's not so easy with everything that's going on and with your mind preying on you. But the Maya had two things on this side. One, things were going slower, but they had a couple of other orientations. We are oriented, our consciousness and our society is oriented by time and place. Time and place, time and place. Physical, 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 physical. The Maya had some more help. They had this orientation right here, which is called personal intent. One through 13. Have you ever been someplace you didn't really intend to be? Like at school, or at work, or the middle of an argument? Did you feel centered? Or did you feel uncentered? Did you feel centered, or were you like off-center? Okay, me too. When I was someplace I didn't really intend to be, I felt off-center. But these guys knew their personal intent. They had that orientation. So it was easier for them to recognize when they were doing what they intended to do with this lifetime. That would help to keep you centered, wouldn't it? If you felt like, right away, if you felt like that wasn't happening, you'd get back onto what you were supposed to do. Okay? They also had this orientation, this major orientation right here, called the divine plan. In our civilization, there is no plan. It's been 16 billion years of happy little accidents that ended up with you sitting on that chair. That's the way our science looks at it. It might as well have been an explosion in a chemical factory that produced you here. There was no divine plan. These guys had a divine plan. They knew, and that there were 20 different aspects of creation. Like a dodecahedron, you know, the geometry figure, 20-sided figure. So this personal intent and this orientation to the divine plan, that is the recognition of your part in the divine plan, that produces a symbol in the Mayan civilization. This diagram right here has a name. It's called the 8 division sky place. And that symbol stands for heaven. You've been there. There are moments in your life when you were oriented by time and place. You knew you were doing what you desired or wanted to do, and you knew you were a part of something much larger than yourself. Felt cool, didn't it? Heavenly, huh? This is the importance of this calendar. The Mayan calendar was never about time. It was always about measuring and keeping track of the flow of creation and the intent of creation and the aspect of creation every single day. Remember, there's one law in the universe. What you pay attention to, you become conscious of. So what if every day you were paying attention to the energy of this flow of creation? What would you become conscious of? So, would it be easier to have your consciousness attuned to your intuition? Easier isn't all that good a word. It's automatic. Without any effort, without any thinking about it at all. And I mean no meditating, I mean no, just forget it. You look in the morning to see what the intent of creation is for that day. Then you go and you live your life. The Maya woke up every morning and celebrated the day for the purpose it served onto creation, and then went and lived their lives. Every day. You know what the word entrainment is? Entrainment is the automatic syncopation of life forms or even mechanical objects. Science doesn't have a real good explanation on why it happens, but they sure know it happens. One example is a baby and a mother when they're nursing. The mother and the baby's heart go into rhythm. They beat at the same time. That's called entrainment. It's a natural matching up. It works for objects too. If you take cuckoo clocks in a clock shop, for instance, and you get them all ticking at different times, within a week or so, they'll all be ticking and talking at exactly the same time. It's called entrainment. And what this is a tool to entrain your consciousness to the flow of creation. 13 and 20. 13 and 20. And it goes 1 through 13, and it goes through these different aspects of creation, all 20 of them, and then starts again. So it's a weave of those two numbers. And you can go way into thinking about it, and it will do you no good whatsoever. It's only what you don't think about it, but end up just knowing from inside that does you any benefit. I know that sounds completely backwards from everything you were taught in school, but, well, we're not in school, are we? A side note, I mean, part of this is that consciousness, we've been talking about consciousness as the awareness of being aware, and we've been talking about the mind as a tool that consciousness uses to see the similarities and differences between things, right? Consciousness, overall, it has a job to do. Consciousness divides creation. It divides it. Have you ever noticed that when you are really conscious, you can see the veins in the leaf? Or you can see the different colors on a butterfly's wings? Or you can count the stars? But when you're upset, and maybe not so conscious, everything looks kind of the same. Have you ever noticed that? The more conscious you are, the more divisions there are in your experience. And the less conscious you are, the more prejudiced you are. Have you noticed that? Where everything and all the experiences or all the people look the same. The job of consciousness is to notice the differences. That's how you count your blessings. That's how you appreciate the experience. Is by looking and picking out the differences. So consciousness divides. And the Mayan calendar says that it divides by 13. All consciousness is divided by 13 in increments of 13 and 13 and 13 and 13. 13 is the number by which consciousness operates. No wonder 13 is unlucky and satanic. Well, creation has a job too. Creation, I mean all of creation, multiplies. And all of creation multiplies by the factor of 20. 20 times. Anybody here studied biology? I mean, the very beginning of biology, from the single egg and on. Multiplies by 20. That's how you got so big. It's through multiplication of your own cells. And it does it in factors of 20, from top to bottom. Interesting, huh? So by following how this weave goes of 13 and 20, I mean, basically that's what we're talking about, is that this rectangle, 13 by 20, just by being aware of that, it entrains your consciousness to all of the interplay of consciousness and creation. And there's nothing that you can think about it that's going to help. It's just what you end up knowing. And your intuition kicks in, and you end up in the right place, meeting the right people, doing the right thing. That's what's going to get us all through this. I'm not saying that this is the only way to do that. I'm saying that this one works all the time. And that's why this is important. There is something else that I want to do, and I want to do it for the camera. I want to do a formula, because everybody desires this one thing. And you look at the basis of all desires. I mean, this has got to be the one that's the strongest. Everybody wants peace of mind, don't they? Peace of mind. Well, that's what, peace of mind's got a lot to do with intuition, doesn't it? Because when you have this, that's usually when this occurs. In fact, in order to have peace of mind, the only time you can possibly have peace of mind is when you are centered. Isn't that true? It's only when you are in this position that you can have peace of mind. Okay? How do you get centered? There's only really one time that you can be centered. That's when you're certain. When you are certain, then you're centered. Okay, where does certainty come from? There's only one source for certainty: the recognition of patterns. The recognition of patterns. Remember the first time that you were trying to learn how to drive? Did you have peace of mind? Were you centered? Were you certain? You didn't recognize the patterns yet, did you? Where does the key go? Which way do you turn it? Which is the gas? Which is the brake? Which is the clutch? Which way do I move this lever? What is this guy doing stopping right in front of me? All of those are patterns. Anybody taking dance lessons? Two-step, I did. Square dance, tango. The more you recognize the patterns, the more certain you get, the more centered you are on the dance floor. To where you have peace of mind dancing in front of your friends. Hundreds of people. It's what you've been doing your whole lives. In every case. To learn something, you're going to recognize the patterns, to become certain, become centered, and have peace of mind about that subject. Now we have the pattern that we can prove So you can be certain. Of course, it takes your own. I've got mine. I would, for the last 4 years, studied in depth all of this stuff. I have my own certainty about this pattern, centering and peace of mind about it. But it's now available. A pattern of the last 16.4 billion years of everything that's happened. And the fact that the pattern shows things are getting better and better. No matter what it looked like at the time, we are evolving. And the situation is getting better and better and better. That will go forward into our future too. Because this ethics is scheduled to overcome power. Just like power overcame law. Have you recognized that? Law overcame reason, didn't it? Didn't it? We studied the law for quite a bit ourselves, just previous to coming here, for about 20 months. And there's very little reason or sanity in the way laws are written. Laws overcame reason. Then, actually, I should point this out, that during this period of time, during the fourth day of this cycle right here, law overcame reason. During the fourth section of this right here, which was from 1874 to 1894, was the fourth day. That's when power overcame law. That's when Carnegie and Rockefeller and Westinghouse all were becoming corporate powers that overcame the laws of nations and people. So we have ethics coming in now, and during the fourth day, which is 2005, ethics will overcome power. We're just watching the throes of a dying animal right now. It's going to look bad, but there's lots of goodness past it. So, peace of mind comes from being, when you're centered. Centeredness comes from certainty, and certainty comes from the recognition of these patterns. So you can look out there and see what's going on and know with certainty that things are getting better. It's going to be very important. You're outnumbered. There are more people worried than certain. There's more people afraid of the future than looking forward to it. That you know. You're outnumbered. So it's very important that you have this as down as you can get it. At our webpage, we have a webpage, and there on the webpage are articles and dates and places to look up data and match the dates so that you yourself can do the research. And don't rely on me or anybody else. It's your certainty you're looking for, not mine. Does that make sense?
What is it?
What? The website. Yeah. I'll just write it big on another piece because I wanted to do something else there. Okay, here's the website. Of course, it's got the W's. I'm glad I had lots of room to write, you know? It's Mayan, that's M-A-Y-A-N, and then Magix is spelled M-A-J-I-X.com. And you go to the learning lab. There's a little button that says Learning Lab. That's where you're going to find lots of the information, and then articles. We've got something like 1,500 articles there. Have fun. I know the winters are long here. Hey, there's a lot to read. I can give you, what I want to do, though, is I want to give you just a little bit of this data. I mean, please go research this for yourself. But I want to give you just a little smattering of it right here. Of this pattern, so you can, so you know. Here is, all of this is the national cycle. This is the first day, first night, second day, second night, all that, all the way down. During the first day of the national cycle, let me show you where that was. That was from 3115 BC forward, okay? This is the national cycle. Here we are in this one. That one is 3115 BC, then the power cycle, and then ethics, or then galactic cycle. What happened in the very first day of that is this was the first idea of one God. Remember, there used to be lots of gods? I mean, all the reasons, you know, there was a rock god, there was a tree god, there was a sky god, there was a... well, right here was the first idea that there was just one God in charge of everything, or created everything. During the first night, which is the application of that, Abraham moved to Canaan and started up a church for that one God. That was the application of that. Then, down here, I'm going to skip a little bit. Down here, the third day is always, always, when the truth comes forward, comes busting forward. During the third day. That third day of that cycle was when Moses received the 10 Commandments. Has that got anything to do with law? Boy, it was laying it down. During that third day, boom, the law was laid down, and that's what the national cycle was all about. Then, during the third night, Islam was created during this third night. And Pythagoras was developing his theories of geometry during this third night. Okay? During the fourth day, right here, during the fourth day, Confucius, Lao Tzu, which was a very important Chinese philosopher, Buddha, and the idea of reincarnation in India. That's what happened during the fourth day. Right in the middle of this cycle. What we have here is, down here in the fifth day, of course, it was Jesus. Okay, down here was more about the second thing of Islam. Here, in the sixth day, was the Crusades, and the Catholic Church was developed. Down here, and then we went into the second wave of Islam, which was the coming back after the Crusades, their backwash. And then we had the Pilgrims down here. And the more development of Christianity, up to where we are now. Over here, in the planetary cycle, this was, of course, 1755, and what we had here was the beginning of the first idea of a telegraph. It didn't even exist yet. It was just written about. Then, during 1794, we had the optical telegraph, right here. Then, in 1834, we had the electrical telegraph developed. During the fourth day, down here, we had the telephone invented. and Tesla. You know who Tesla is? With electricity. I was working with Westinghouse and then split off from them and developed what would be free energy during the fourth day. Then we have down here, we have in the fifth day, the radio was invented, and of course E equals mc squared. Then here in the sixth day, the television was invented, and then down here in the seventh day, the internet. Okay? Now, let's go over here and look at the galactic. This is planetary. Here we are at the galactic. What are we going to see here? Well, in 1999, we saw Y2K, right? Then, during this first night, which was the very end of 99 into 2000, what we saw was the WFO riots, World Federation Organization, the consolidation of power was rebelled against during that period of time. There was, during the year of 2000, we had the display of polarity, that is, people in the streets backing away from the power organization. That's in the second night, 2001, we had 9/11. Pretty strong demonstration of the haves and have-nots. During the third day, which started in 2002, we had, also right here we had the financial collapse, the tech bubble burst right there. 2002, we had Enron. 2003, we have the rest of them. Plus, we have the scandal, let's just call it scandals, coming to light. In other words, during this third day, the truth started to flow out, that things weren't right. During the third night, it has been applied, hasn't it? People are going to jail. People who were caught then are going to jail now. What people were finding out about the economy and how rickety it is, now, during this third night, the economy is failing. The money supplies, well, there's over money supply, which means that your dollar is worth less and worthless and worthless and worthless. And all that is coming forward right now. Right now. Preparing to sweep the field clear for the fourth day. Remember, the fourth day here, all this philosophy was developed here. Here, we got the ability to communicate freely and Tesla with his work in energy. What we're looking at right here is the exposure of free energy for everyone. This, during the fourth night, is when it will become applied worldwide. What is the discrepancy between the rich and the poor? How much power they have available, how much energy they have at their disposal. That is the only thing. Without enough energy available to everyone, you can manufacture lack of anything. You can manufacture a lack of water, of food, of transportation, easily, just by regulating the amount of energy they have. Here, that ends. In the fourth day, which is, it starts November 28th, 2005. Almost the end of 2005, November, is when that starts, and runs through 2006. Here we have 2007, I'll just write it that way. 2007 is the fifth day. Now here we had Jesus, here we had E equals MC squared. Here, what do you suppose is going to happen? Don't you suppose maybe a blend of the two? The fact that you are divine and that everything is possible. I mean, here is where we're liable to meet the neighbors. Extraterrestrials. Right there. 2007. We can't meet them face to face right now because we don't have an ethical consciousness, do we? We have a power consciousness. We shouldn't be out there. Can you see us out there in the galaxy right now? Earth #1, we'll kick your... You know, that's how we'd go at it. We'd be attacking everybody. We're under quarantine until we get over this power trip. Then we'll be able to meet the neighbors. And during this time, right here, in by 2008, there will be the end of manufactured lack. Absolutely, there won't be any lack of anything. Because up here, during this period of time, we will have teleportation. You think we're kidding? I have an article right here about, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but there's a little article right here about spooky science. You guys read that in the paper? It was in your guys' paper. Spooky science offers promising step toward ultra-fast computers, but what they're talking about here is the ability to record the molecular data of an object or thing, or you, and then send that data instantly to another place and have it remanufactured at the other end. Beam me up, exactly. And they're moving right toward it. It's constant acceleration. So by this time, by 2007, we'll have teleportation, at least for objects. Of course, that'll put everybody out of a job. Yeah. I mean, everybody, most of you guys have something to do with the delivery of goods or services. It's instant delivery. And if you can take a recording and send it once, why not be able to send it 1,000 times to different places, all at the same time?
So where's the fall of the financial world?
Right now. Now. This, third night. Right here. The question is, when is the falling of the financial world? Right now. The dollar and the Canadian dollar, the loonie and the toonies are absolutely worthless. They're worth nothing. They're not worth any, taking up space in your pocket.
So what's going to replace it in the new world then?
Only admiration. Yeah. Then, I'm going to go on just a little bit. 2009 will be a time of getting used to bliss. It's going to take some practice. We've been so involved in everything going wrong that we're going to have to get used to being able to create things going right. It's going to be like learning to walk or live all over again. And this all leads toward what we were talking about right here, October 28th, 2011. October 28th, 2011, the end of the Mayan calendar, when we are consciously co-creating our experience. Time travel is all in here too. So if you can travel any time you want, what good's the calendar? You know, it all goes, the whole idea of time and space goes extinct as orientations. That's what's in our future. we do have this little bit of a hump to get over here with the governments and the economy. Yes?
If time travel becomes normal, are you saying that we could have it in our past as well?
I'm not sure.
Would that be a...
I know that it's coming. I know that we have already time-traveled electrons in the laboratory.
So there would be, you could meet people that have now died. You could go
Possible. Everything is becoming more and more possible. Yeah.
It's pretty hard to conceive, isn't it?
It really is. It's sort of like being 4 years old and your mom is like pulling stuff off the top shelf. You know stuff is up there. but you don't know what it is. It's just not at that stage yet, and that's how we all are right now. Oh, up here.
Say something in a little response to her, but I mean, if you know a little bit about shamanism, they're time travelers.
Shamans?
Yeah.
Oh,
like
yeah.
The universal experiences, they will see prehistoric beasts or whatever, and it's universal no matter what culture they came from.
Yes, it is.
That's a time traveling.
Yeah, indigenous people already had bits and pieces and parts of this all along. We've lost it, and now we're gaining it back. Sometimes you don't know what you got until it's gone. You know?
Native cultures weren't persecuted as much.
Yeah, it won't be this time. It'll be wide open, accepted, and understood. Yeah. Yes?
Yeah, just you mentioned the source or where creation is coming from and our consciousness. I just wanted you to comment on something I read about this Mayan calendar was kind of written off by our science, right? Basically.
Well, it's being confirmed by our science.
But early on, they didn't really pay attention to it, like for instance. So, right. But I've books like the Edgar Cayce books, and that it came from outer space. Other people, not scientists, were trying to say that the Mayan people could not have had this, and that they got it from somewhere else. I don't agree with that. Why couldn't people have it? You know, but could you comment on that? And now you're saying that we're just about to meet the neighbors, and somebody else was saying that they've already met the neighbors and got all this from them, right?
Right. At least a couple of neighbors, not all the neighbors, you know, like individuals. Well, like extraterrestrials are here right now. Power, hungry, sneaky, secretive, unethical alien beings. Not everybody out there with high tech is all goodness and light, you know. So we're already in some sort of contact with extraterrestrials, but they're not the ethical ones. What I'm talking about here is we'll be in face-to-face contact, good, clean communication with our neighbors, exchanging data and technology and all that on an ethical basis. Yes? Any other questions? Oh, yes. Up here at the front again.
With this type of calendar, I watched several documentaries on prophecies from all different nations since the beginning of times till now. So where does how do all the chaotic things fit in? Say, Nostradamus is, for example, saying we are disembarking on maybe a 27-year period of absolute war and miserable things.
Well, we're embarking on an absolute destruction of everything that you rely on.
Okay, so that's all included.
Yeah. Everything that you rely on, delivery of electricity, of food, of water, and stuff like that, will all be threatened in the very, very near future.
So this isn't going to blissfully transfer?
Oh, no. Just like Bush is not going to go, oh, I'm sorry, excuse me, I screwed up. I'm out of here. No. He and all of his people are not going to walk away. Yeah, it's going to be rough. But it's going to be short. Very important to understand. It's going to be quick, vicious, and over with. 6 months. 6 months. 6 to 9 months most. And then we'll be putting the pieces back together. But we do necessarily have to go through that. And every time, every third night, there is like a boom. Revolution. Well, here. This one, 1854. What was happening in America, 1854, right, 1861, was the Civil War. And during this whole period, there's civil wars all over the world. In Russia, in India, in Spain, France, there were civil wars everywhere. We're just going through the same cycle again. The world didn't end then. It's not going to end now. It's just going to be rough. Yeah?
About the changes that you're talking about in your Okanagan tapes, you had mentioned that shortly after this December, there's the issue of the slowing of the rotation of the Earth.
Oh, yeah, that was Greg Braden.
That's from Braden's material? That's from Greg Braden's material?
Yeah, Greg Braden was, I was referencing to Greg Braden's material where he was saying that we're going to be coming to 0 point. Right. Zero magnetics and a slowing of the Earth and then a reversing of the spin.
I would like to hear your comments on what type of a reality you envision after the Earth has stopped and started the other way, in light of the comments about all these new technologies supposedly coming in. And
I don't have anything concrete to say about it. I have my own personal thoughts about it, that it will reverse the polarity on the power, you know, to where people won't be so self-centered, but will be open to more inclusion.
But my question still comes to the point that if this scenario does take place, then realistically one could assume that we're looking at something like, what, 2 or 3% of the world's population surviving? You start spinning things.
More than likely it'll be about it'll either be 2/3 or 1/3. Okay. Because that's the natural proportions of everything, is 1/3 to 2/3. So it depends on how well people understand what we're coming up on and going through.
So this is the ascension process, basically.
Well, it's
when we talk about ascension, that's the intuitive mind, right? So the promise of ascension is that this time we're taking our bodies with us versus leaving them behind. Our consciousness will teleport us, in other words.
Oh, yeah.
When the time is right.
Actually, right now it's happening. It's a process. Yeah. It's like a tree grows up and then bears fruit, but it's been growing the whole time. You see, we're growing very rapidly right now.
Do you think it's a possibility that those that aren't ready would be teleported to another place, or is Earth going to stay Earth?
It's very possible that aliens not so ethical will very soon show up in the skies and start teleporting people, you know, beaming them up and shipping them wherever. I mean, it's much more is possible now than ever before. Like all kinds of goodness and badness all at the same time. All the science fiction shows that you've ever seen, those possibilities are more there. Because more is happening in less time. What exactly is going to happen, nobody exactly knows. Other than, we're going to call an end to this talk. That is predicted. I'm getting hungry, and I bet you guys are too.